Hello, Dr. Sen. Welcome to the show.
Good morning.
What are your initial thoughts? The first advance estimate of GDP has been released. So what do you think about it?
In a sense, I think it confirms a lot of our worst fears, which is that consumption is not doing anything at all. And what it is essentially pointing to is, despite the fact that the GDP is above, slightly marginally though, above what it was in 1920, consumption is seriously below that level, which means that there is something that is happening in the system which we need to take account of, because that can actually present long-run challenges. And I think by and large, the view is that there have been such significant income distribution effects that the lower tiers, who are the high consumers, they have lost in favor of higher income people who are high savers. And that's something that we need to worry about a little bit. The plus point, of course, in all of this data, which is unexpectedly strong, was capital formation. We know that capital formation in the government and in the corporate sector was fairly strong. We know what has been happening in the capital markets. But given the kind of weak numbers that the banks have been putting out, right? The gross capital, fixed capital formation number came as a surprise. Okay. And really the question then is, where are these numbers coming from? Because the banks are still not lending very much. They've just stated their intent to lend in the current month.
Do you think then the fast advance estimates are actually overestimating the GDP growth?
I suspect it is. In any case, the same procedure. Now, what this doesn't do, unfortunately, is that it doesn't factor in the third wave at all. Okay, with the third wave, we don't even, at this moment, we don't know how the third wave is going to play out. But what we do know, and this is the important thing, is it doesn't depend so much upon the spread of the disease. What it depends is upon the kind of restrictions that various governments at the state level and at the local body level, they put in place. That's what has the large economic impact. So it's true during the first wave and the second wave. Right. So the question really is, what will be the government response? And this is not the central government we are talking about. This is state and local body governments. If they do what they did during the second wave, I think we can confidently expect the economic effect to be similar to what happened during the second wave, which was about a 7.5 percentage point decline in GDP.
Do you think the major impact of this will be felt in the fourth quarter only, or it can extend to next?
See, the third wave is on its way up now, and we're still in January. So if the trajectory is anything to go by, then we should be seeing it peak by the end of February or so. So the likelihood that the major impact will be in February and March, to put it in the fourth quarter, with some residual effect in April.
So do you mean to say we can even see a contraction in the fourth quarter? That's what you are
It is possible. If lockdowns happen, like Delhi's now done a weekend lockdown and a night curfew, right? But if states start doing what they did last time around, which is put 2-3 week lockdowns at a stretch where no economic activity is permitted, yes, we could see a negative growth. But as I said, this is entirely dependent upon the kind of policy reactions that the state and local body governments have to the spread of disease.
So the Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, will be presenting her fourth budget in a few days from now. What do you think are the major challenges before her?
Well, you see, the big challenge, I think, is inflation. One of the things that's come out very clearly is that whatever the headline CPI may be, and I think we've all gotten trapped into thinking too much about the CPI because that's what the Reserve Bank uses. But if you look at what is possibly the most accurate measure of inflation, which is the GDP deflator, that was running at 8.5%. Right? And that's way above anybody's comfort zone. So inflation is going to be a challenge. And you look at what's happening to the WPI, it continues to be well in the double digits. The CPI may be muted, but the WPI is high, which means that sooner or later, there is going to be a pass on. We don't know when it will happen. It depends upon the extent to which the consumption side starts responding. But there will be a pass on sooner or later. So inflation is a challenge, but it isn't obvious that the finance minister can do very much about it in the budget. Okay, but what the finance minister can do in the budget is to take the responsibility for growth away from the monetary policy and bring it squarely into fiscal policy and instruct RBI to look after the inflation problem.
So if RBI increases interest rates, so that will also impact the growth momentum, right?
Yes, it will. But you can then have offsetting fiscal policies, which can come in the budget.
Okay.
So what it would mean is a monetary contraction and a fiscal expansion.
What can the finance minister do when it comes to fiscal expansion in the budget? Which are the sectors?
Well, that is the big question, right? So far, tax collections have been very good, and we have no reason to believe that they will not continue to be good next year. They are well above what the government had expected. Non-tax collection, in any case, when the last budget was presented, I think we all collectively had serious doubts about those numbers, particularly the disinvestment numbers. That problem continues to persist. But the tax collection numbers does give the finance minister a fair amount of headroom to do an expansionary fiscal policy. Okay. And the question is, will she make use of that headroom, or will she start going for an early fiscal correction? That is really the big question mark that exists at the moment. So my preferred option, given the inflation challenge, is that she should actually take advantage of that headroom and have a fiscal expansion and tell RBI to focus on moderating inflation.
So do you think, given the robust tax collections, there can be some leeway given to on the personal tax, income tax front to the middle class?
That's by and large a bad idea, Ashik. Okay, and it's a bad idea simply because people who are actually paying income tax are the ones who've done reasonably well. The people who are suffering are the ones who don't pay income tax anyway. So if you give an income tax break now, it's very unlikely to lead to a sufficiently high consumption response. What it will probably do is lead to a fairly high savings response. Okay, you don't need extra savings at this point in time. We are not savings constrained in any sense. Mm-hmm. What we do need to do is to be able to get incomes in the hands of those who continue to suffer, whose consumption is seriously down from the 1920 levels, and quite seriously down, mind you. And that will not be achieved by a tax break. It will have to be achieved on the expenditure side.
But this government has so far focused mostly on the supply side measures.
This is correct.
So do you think that they will change track with this budget and go for a demand side stimulus?
Well, I hope so, because the supply side measures haven't worked. I mean, let's be very clear on that. We've been trying the supply side measures for 2 years now. It's not just last year, it was the year before as well. And they didn't work. So it's about time we learned from our own past and start focusing a little bit more on the demand side this time around.
So when it comes to demand side measures to boost consumption at the lower strata, what exactly you think the finance minister should be doing?
You see, there are two things that can be done. One, of course, is the kind of direct income transfers That has been done before. Some of it continues to be done now, like the PM Kisan Yojana. That's one way of doing it. The problem with doing that, unfortunately, is that for a very large proportion of the people that we are talking about, the government may not actually have the information to be able to directly pass the cash on to them. And that poses a challenge. I mean, there are fairly serious leakage issues that the government will have to contend with. But that would be a very good option if you could do it with a reasonable degree of targeting. The other alternative, of course, is to do a DBT type transfer, where you essentially give the same amount to everybody. Whoever has an Aadhaar card and has a bank account linked to it, you put in the same amount of money. Yes, the rich and the middle class, upper middle class will get a certain amount, but frankly, we are a fairly small proportion of the economy, right? It's not going to make very much of a difference to our lives, but it would make significant difference to the lives of the people who are the bottom 80% of the income ladder.
Right. Also, the informal sector is believed to have been significantly impacted.
Yes.
And though the government has come out with some schemes, supply side schemes, they seem to have not worked fully. So what do you think government should be doing now?
Well, you see, again, the supply side measures, and this is completely sort of a continuation of what was done last year, that it is essentially creating windows in the banks, right? Which depends essentially upon the bankers actually responding with some degree of enthusiasm. And the fact of the matter is the bankers have not done anything of that kind. And for good reason. At the moment, the banking data looks rosy, but I think there's a lot of hidden damage that exists. And so the bankers are going to be very, very wary, particularly of informal sector loans, most of which would be non-collateralized. And bankers don't like non-collateralized loans, which is one of the reasons that if you look at what has been happening lately, the banks haven't been lending. The only people who have been lending to the MSMEs have been the NBFCs, who are relatively used to working with non-collateralized lending.
But given that there is talk that the work from informal sector is slowly shifting to the formal sector, and because of all the constraints and the impact of the COVID pandemic, they have been languishing. So do you think there is certain interventions necessary for the informal sector?
No, it is absolutely essential. But what you do really depends upon your diagnosis. Shock coming up. If the unit is dead, it has closed down, restarting it is a much more difficult proposition than keeping something going. And you need a different set of tools and a different mindset approach to be able to address that problem. Okay? In a sense, you're having to create new entrepreneurship. So you're looking at new entrepreneurs who are going to start up new businesses. This is very different from an ongoing business where the banks have a certain degree of confidence given the kind of relationship they've had with that particular customer. This is tougher. And It's something the government has to think about. And it's essentially things like guarantees and loans or some kind of insurance is the sort of thing that you may want to look at.
What do you think the budget can do or the finance minister should be doing on some tricky issues like the crypto?
You're really asking for my ideological position on this. And my ideological position on this is, look, if cryptos are going to be an asset class, let them be an asset class. I don't care very much. The whole point is what happens when you have an interface between the crypto world and the sovereign currency world. That's where the problems start. Now, that you need to be able to check. Now, one of the things that the government had done, and I thought it was fairly sensible, was to instruct the banks that they could not do any deals on crypto. I mean, they couldn't exchange crypto for cash. But then that, I believe, has been struck down by the courts. But that is precisely, I think, what is needed. But it's not enough, because the other way in which cryptos can actually affect the economy quite significantly is through the foreign exchange market. So if somebody actually is trading in cryptos and it converts the cryptos into dollars on a, let's say in the United States, they can transmit the dollars back into India through the foreign exchange market. All right. So that can create a problem. So there are two channels that you really need to look at. One is on the side of the banking sector. And I think the government was right in what it did, which is saying that the bank should not get involved in any trade in cryptos or any conversion of cryptos. And the second side you have to look at, which hasn't been talked about, unfortunately enough, is the foreign exchange side, foreign exchange markets. And perhaps some more questions need to be asked in terms of inflow of foreign exchange. We ask a lot of questions about outflows, inflows less so.
Right, and that's what is the RBI is also concerned about, because
yes, and I think that's a legitimate concern.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Sen, for joining for this show.
No, it was a pleasure, Arshit, and all the best.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.